The festival lights draped across every corridor of Harmony Ring like frozen rivers of light, their usual soft blue glow transformed into a kaleidoscope of celebratory color for the Convergence. Ostina Aivdo stood just outside the entrance to the Copper Nebula, the station's most celebrated bistro, her breath catching in a quiet, nervous rhythm. Around her, a river of beings flowed past, families with laughing children, couples with fingers intertwined, clusters of friends buzzing with anticipation, all streaming toward the main viewing deck where the great gas giant Moria would soon perform its celestial ballet with its 7 moons. A cosmic alignment that happened once every 12 standard years. Half the station had gathered to witness it. She smoothed the fabric of her emerald dress, a traditional Valoran garment that shimmered like liquid metal against her pale green skin. The motion was self-conscious, a futile attempt to calm the flutter in her chest. In the polished viewport beside the ornate door, her reflection stared back, blonde hair falling straight past her shoulders, framing the delicate points of her ears, the unmistakable mark of a Valoran. Her eyes, a shade of blue slightly larger than a human's and flecked with starlight silver, held a vulnerability that bordered on hope. It was a dangerous thing to feel. It had been her colleague, Tessana, who had arranged this. Blind date was the human term. The concept was strange to Ostina, whose people typically formed bonds through deep, empathic communion and prolonged community circles. But she was trying to belong here. His name is Howard Beckwith, Tessana had said just 2 days prior, her human face alight with enthusiastic conviction as they tended the hydroponic sprouts in the agricultural bay. A trade negotiator, very successful, very single. He specifically mentioned he's open to cross-species experiences. I showed him your profile holo. He said you seemed fascinating. Fascinating. The word had hung in the sterile, recycled air. It could mean anything. You've been alone too long, Ostina, Tessana had added, her voice softening with a kindness that nonetheless carried the sting of truth. Alone too long. The phrase echoed in Ostina's mind as she watched another family pass, a human father lifting a giggling toddler onto his shoulders. 3 years on Harmony Ring. 3 years of watching connections spark and solidify around her while she remained on the periphery. The polite colleague, the diligent scientist, the quiet neighbor. Never the companion. Back on Valoria, her family's subspace messages were growing increasingly pointed, inquiring with gentle but persistent worry when her extended sabbatical might end and she would return home to participate in the community bonding registry. The pressure was a low, constant hum in the back of her consciousness, like the station's life support systems. Gathering a courage that felt thin and brittle, Ostina pushed through the bistro's entrance. Warmth enveloped her, a physical and sensory embrace after the station corridor's controlled chill. The air was rich with the mingled, comforting scents of roasted meats, yeasty breads, and spiced beverages from a dozen different worlds. The Copper Nebula had been decorated lavishly for the Convergence. Holographic evergreen trees, a quaint human tradition, rotated slowly in the corners, their branches heavy with lights that cycled gently through the spectrum. Garlands of gold and crimson wound around the polished support pillars. Most striking of all was a genuine fire crackling in a stone hearth against the far wall, an astounding luxury on a space station where every molecule of oxygen was meticulously reclaimed and recycled. The display of reckless, beautiful waste took her breath away. "Reservation for Beckwith?" she asked the hostess, a cheerful human woman whose silver hair was woven with tiny, glowing convergence pins. "Of course. Right this way." The hostess's smile was warm, genuine. She led Ostina to table 14. It was a lovely spot, intimate and slightly secluded, near the comforting radiance of the fireplace. The table was set with crisp white linens, polished cutlery, and a small, real wax candle that flickered between two empty wine glasses. The promise of a shared meal, a shared moment. Ostina sat, arranging the napkin across her lap with deliberate care. She folded her hands in her lap, then unfolded them, placing them on the table. She checked the delicate chrono band on her wrist. She was precisely on time. 20 minutes passed. The gentle hum of conversation and clinking cutlery around her seemed to grow incrementally louder. She ordered a glass of water, just to have something to hold, something to do. The server, a young man with kind eyes, paused after delivering it. "Waiting for someone?" he asked gently. "Yes," Ostina said, her voice softer than she intended. She offered a smile that felt fragile on her lips. "He'll be along." He nodded, his expression neutral, but she caught the faintest whisper of pity from him before he turned away. Valoran's empathic sensitivity was not always a blessing. It let her feel the emotional weather of a room, whether she wanted to or not. Right now, she felt the warm fronts of joy and celebration everywhere, which only made the cold settling in her own chest more pronounced. 30 minutes. She studied the other patrons. At a nearby table, human children laughed over plates of vibrant, colorful pasta, their faces smudged with sauce. An elderly Crothian couple, their leathery blue skin etched with a lifetime of wrinkles, held hands across the table, whispering to each other in their native tongue, a series of soft clicks and hums that sounded like a private music. A human family of 5 debated loudly and joyously over which dessert to share, their argument punctuated by giggles and playful shoves. Each scene was a vignette of connection, a portrait of belonging from which she was separated by an invisible pane of glass. 42 minutes after the agreed time, Howard Beckwith arrived. He was tall, dressed in an impeccably tailored gray suit that spoke of expense and intention. His dark hair was slicked back with precise care. Ostina felt a nervous flutter reignite as she saw him approach, a last-ditch surge of hope. She rose slightly from her chair, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture she had practiced in her quarters. He did not take it. He stopped 3 feet from the table, his eyes performing a swift, assessing sweep of her person. The visual inventory was clinical, and Ostina felt the first wave of his emotions before he even spoke. A cool wash of disappointment, a spike of irritation, and beneath it, a sour, unmistakable note of distaste. Her empathic senses recoiled. "So, you're Tessana's friend," he stated. It was not a question. His voice was flat, devoid of the warmth she'd foolishly imagined. "Yes," Ostina said, lowering her hand slowly to her side. She kept her voice carefully neutral, a skill honed through too many similar moments. "I'm Ostina Aivdo. It's wonderful to meet you, Howard. Tessana has told me so much." "Look," he cut her off, his hand making a dismissive, chopping motion in the air. "I'm going to be honest. I don't believe in wasting time. Mine or yours." He remained standing, did not remove his fine wool coat, did not gesture toward the empty chair. "When Tessa said she knew someone, she didn't mention you were." He gestured vaguely, a flutter of his fingers that encompassed her green skin, her pointed ears, the elegant drape of her Valoran dress, everything that she was. "Valoran," Ostina supplied, the word dropping into the space between them like a stone. "I've got nothing against your kind," Howard said, in the universally recognized tone of someone who absolutely did. "Professionally, some of your diplomats are quite sharp. But for this," he gestured between them, "I'm looking for something more compatible. You understand, biologically, culturally. It's simpler. Nothing personal." It was entirely personal, and the lie hung in the air, acrid and transparent. The candle flame between them guttered as if in agreement. "I should have asked more questions before agreeing to this," he continued, already half turning, his body language a closed door. "My mistake. Enjoy the convergence." And then he was gone, weaving back through the tables without a backward glance, leaving Ostina standing alone beside a table set for two. The empty chair across from her seemed to mock her, a monument to her naivete. The untouched wine glasses gleamed in the candlelight. She sat down slowly, mechanically, as if her joints were operated by rusty pulleys. The sounds of the bistro, the laughter, the clatter, the joyous chaos of celebration, swelled around her, not as music but as a crushing weight. It pressed against her ears, against her heart. She turned her face toward the wall, toward the hypnotic dance of the real flames, away from the happy tables. Her throat tightened, a painful constriction that made swallowing impossible. 17. This had been the 17th first date in 3 years. Each one a variation on the same theme. Initial curiosity that quickly curdled into polite disinterest, awkwardness, or outright rejection. Too alien, too different, too strange. She had tried so hard to bridge the gap, adjusting her clothing, mastering human idioms, studying their history and art. She could quote Earth poets and understood the rules of their popular sports. None of it mattered. At the end of the day, she was a green-skinned, pointy-eared empath from a world of communal bonds, sitting alone at a table for two. A small, traitorous sound escaped her, a half-breath, half-sob, caught in her chest. She pressed her fingertips hard against her closed eyelids, applying physical pressure to hold back the tears. Valoran tears were slightly luminescent, a soft bioluminescent response to strong emotion. They would catch the firelight and glow, announcing her shattered state to the entire room. She would not give Howard Beckwith, or anyone else, that satisfaction. Her coat was draped over the back of her chair. She reached for it, her movements sharp with the urgent need to flee, to vanish into the anonymous corridors of the station, to hide in her quiet quarters with their view of endless, indifferent stars. But before her fingers could close on the fabric, a small voice piped up from beside her chair. "'Excuse me, why are you leaking?" Ostina froze. She looked down. A little human girl stood there, no more than 3 or 4 standard years old. She had a tousled mop of blonde hair gathered into 2 small pigtails that stuck out from her head like optimistic antennae. She wore a red velvet dress, trimmed with white synthetic fur, the fabric shot through with thin, integrated LED threads that pulsed with a gentle, steady blue light. In the crook of her arm, she clutched a stuffed bear. But this was no ordinary plush toy. It was clearly robotic, crafted from brushed metal and soft synthetic fibers, its joints articulated, its eyes 2 glowing amber lenses. It had a friendly, patient demeanor, even in its stillness. The child stared up at Ostina with wide, unblinking brown eyes. There was no fear in them. No hesitation, only open curiosity and a touch of concern. "Leaking," Ostina managed, her voice thick. The girl pointed a small, blunt finger at Ostina's cheek. "From your eyes. My daddy says that happens when people are sad. Or when they cut onions. Did you cut onions?" The sheer, innocent absurdity of the question broke through the wall of Ostina's despair. A laugh, brittle and broken but real, escaped her. "No," she whispered, wiping hastily at her cheek. "No onions." The girl nodded, her expression turning solemn with the gravity of a scientist confirming a hypothesis. "Then you're sad. That's okay. Mr. Wobbles gets sad sometimes, too." She held up the robotic bear. As if on cue, its head swiveled toward Ostina with a soft, precise whir, and it waved one jointed paw in a slow, deliberate arc. A tiny, synthesized voice, warm and fuzzy with static, emanated from it. "Hugs can be algorithmically beneficial. Would you like a hug?" In that moment, something in Ostina's chest didn't just crack, it dissolved. The careful walls she'd built around her heart, the layers of professional composure and cultural adjustment, melted under the sheer, unexpected force of this child's kindness. It was an offer with no agenda, no calculation, no assessment of compatibility. Just pure, simple compassion. "That's very sweet of you," Ostina whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm Evanice," the girl announced. She held up 4 fingers, scrutinized them, frowned with immense concentration, and carefully tucked her pinky down. "I'm 3. What's your name?" "Ostina." "Ostina," Evanice repeated, breaking the name into careful, musical syllables. "That's pretty. Like a song." She tilted her head, her gaze traveling over Ostina's face, her hair, her ears, with the frank, unabashed curiosity that only the very young possess. "You're green. Like the holiday trees. Are you a convergence fairy?" Another laugh, this one warmer, less fractured, bubbled up from a place inside Ostina she had thought dormant. "I'm a Valoran. We come from a planet called Valoria. Is it green there, too?" "Parts of it are," Ostina said, finding herself smiling through the remains of her tears. The forests are very, very green. And the oceans are a color you might call turquoise. Evanice's eyes widened into saucers. I want to go there. Evanice. A voice, male, low, and edged with gentle concern, called from a few tables away. Ostina looked up. A man was weaving his way toward them, moving with the careful urgency of a parent who has momentarily lost sight of their child in a crowd. He was tall, with dark hair that curled slightly at his temples, and a beard trimmed close to his jaw. He wore simple, practical clothes, a gray sweater over a darker shirt, trousers of a durable fabric. Nothing fancy, but clean and well-fitting. His eyes, a warm, kind brown that was an exact match for Evanice's, were fixed on his daughter. "Evanice, sweetheart, you can't just run off and—" He stopped as he reached them, taking in the scene. His daughter standing beside a clearly distressed alien woman, the untouched table for two, the single, flickering candle. His initial reprimand died on his lips. "I'm sorry," he said instead, placing a gentle hand on Evanice's shoulder. "She's very friendly. The concept of boundaries is still a work in progress." He offered Ostina a small, apologetic smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I hope she wasn't bothering you." "She was making my eyes leak less," Evanice supplied helpfully. The man's expression shifted. The polite apology softened into something deeper, more empathetic, as his gaze took in Ostina's damp, faintly luminous cheeks, the empty chair, the palpable aura of loneliness that even a human could likely sense. Understanding dawned on his face, followed by a wave of unfeigned sympathy. "I'm Gerald," he said quietly. "Gerald Kale. And you've already met my chief negotiator, Evanice. Ostina Aivdo." Gerald reached into the pocket of his trousers and pulled out a cloth handkerchief, actual woven fabric, not a disposable synthetic wipe. On a space station, such an object was a rarity, a small token of a different time. He placed it on the table beside her water glass without ceremony, without attempting to hand it to her, without making her feel observed or pitied. "Bad night?" he asked, his voice simple, direct, and free of judgment. "You could say that," Ostina admitted, picking up the handkerchief. It was soft, well worn. It smelled faintly of soap and something warm, like engine grease and ozone. A working man's scent. He merely nodded, asking for no details. Then he crouched down beside Evanice, bringing himself to her eye level. "Sweetheart, this lady was having some private time. We need to let her be and go finish our dinner." Evanice's lower lip jutted out in a stubborn pout. "But she's sad. You always say we have to help sad people." "I did say that, didn't I?" Gerald conceded with a sigh, running a hand through his hair. "And she's alone. Nobody should be alone on Convergence. Not ever." Evanice turned back to Ostina with the unshakable, watertight logic of a 3-year-old who has found a glorious loophole in the social contract. "Do you want to eat dinner with us? Daddy ordered the chicken, but they gave us too much bread, and I can't eat all the bread by myself." "It's a lot of bread." Gerald's mouth opened, then closed. He looked genuinely, adorably caught off guard, not embarrassed, but startled by the sheer audacity of his daughter's solution. Evanice, we can't just invite. But if she doesn't have anybody to eat with, Evanice interrupted, gesturing emphatically at the profoundly empty chair across from Ostina. Look, that seat is lonely. Ostina felt that warm, stirring sensation in her chest again. There was no agenda here, no silent calculation of biological or cultural compatibility. Just a child who had seen a crack in another soul and decided, instinctively, to try to fill it with bread and company. Gerald straightened slowly, rubbing the back of his neck in a gesture that perfectly conveyed a mixture of awkwardness and sincere compassion. He met Ostina's gaze. She's not usually this insistent. But the offer stands. If you'd rather not be alone tonight, you're more than welcome to join us. No pressure. Just bread and company. Ostina looked at Evanice's hopeful, earnest face, at the patient Mr. Wobbles in her arms, at Gerald Cale standing there, offering a lifeline without a single string attached. She thought of her quiet, empty quarters, of the silent calm terminal waiting for her with its probable messages from Valoria, of the long, hollow Convergence night stretching ahead. A solitary tear, this one born of a different, gentler emotion, traced a glowing path down her cheek. She smiled, a real one this time, feeling it reach her eyes. I'd like that, she said softly. I'd like that very much. Evanice squealed with pure delight, a sound like tiny bells, and before Ostina could react, the little girl had grabbed her hand. Her small fingers were warm and slightly sticky, and they closed around Ostina's with absolute trust. Come on. Our table has a view of the big planet. It's all swirly. Their table was tucked into a curved alcove near the great viewing windows, where the immense, amber-banded sphere of Moria dominated the star-strewn blackness. Evanice took charge of the seating arrangements with the gravity of a starship captain. Ostina was to sit on one side, Gerald on the other, and Evanice herself would sit in the middle, like the peanut butter in a sandwich. Mr. Wobbles was given a place of honor at the corner of the table. Evanice explained, with immense seriousness, that he needed his own water glass. Because robots get thirsty, too. Just different thirsty. He drinks electricity, she clarified, seeing Ostina's raised eyebrow. But he likes to pretend. Gerald caught Ostina's eye across the table, a glint of shared amusement crinkling his features. I tried to explain that robots don't need to pretend. I lost that argument approximately 8 months ago. I've surrendered. Mr. Wobbles has feelings, Evanice stated, a mutable law. Dr. Eunora said so. Dr. Eunora is the station's chief roboticist, Gerald explained to Ostina. She made the fatal error of mentioning to Evanice that advanced companion models have rudimentary emotional subroutines for responsive bonding. Evanice interpreted this as, Mr. Wobbles has a soul. My attempts at semantic clarification have been deemed mean and unnecessary. Ostina found herself smiling, a relaxed, effortless smile that felt foreign on her face. That seems like a perfectly reasonable interpretation to me. See, Daddy, Evanice said triumphantly. She gets it. The food arrived. Gerald had a plate of herb-roasted poultry. Evanice had a colorful bowl of star and spiral-shaped pasta. When the server turned to Ostina, Gerald leaned forward slightly. Not to presume, he said quietly, but if you're looking for a recommendation, the wild mushroom risotto is exceptional. The mycology bay does incredible work. It was a small thing. A simple suggestion, not an order. But after Howard Beckwith's presumptuous dismissal, this quiet respect for her autonomy felt profound. She ordered the risotto. It was, as promised, sublime. As they ate, conversation flowed with an ease that astonished Ostina. Evanice was a fount of chatter, providing a running, unfiltered commentary on station life. The grumpy tabby cat who patrolled the hydroponics bay, his name is Sergeant Fuzzybottom. He bit me once, but I forgive him. The merits of various nutrient paste flavors, purple is the best. Obviously. And her detailed plans for a birthday party for Mr. Wobbles. He wants cake, but he can't eat it, so I will eat it for him. It's a sacrifice. Gerald interjected now and then with gentle corrections or added context, his voice a calm, warm counterpoint to his daughter's exuberance. But mostly, he let Evanice hold court, watching her with an expression of such weary, boundless adoration that it made Ostina's heart ache in a new, unfamiliar way. During a lull, while Evanice was intently trying to spear 5 pasta stars on a single fork, Ostina asked, "What do you do here on Harmony Ring, Gerald?" "Environmental systems engineering," he said, shrugging as if it were nothing. "Life support, mostly. Atmospheric processors, water reclamation, thermal regulation. Not the most glamorous work on the station, but someone has to make sure the air stays breathable and the temperature stays shirt-sleeve." "That seems fairly critical," Ostina said, smiling. "It has its moments. There's a certain satisfaction in keeping the heartbeat of a place like this steady." A flicker of quiet pride crossed his face. "There and gone. What about you? I don't think I've seen you in the engineering bays." "Agricultural development. I work in the experimental cultivation labs. We're trying to adapt some high-yield Valoran crop strains for closed-system hydroponics." "The Golden Grain Project," Gerald said, his eyes lighting with genuine recognition. "I've read the bulletins. The theoretical yield is 3 times standard wheat per square meter. That could change things for a lot of frontier stations." Ostina felt a flush of professional pride, so rarely felt these days. "We're close. Another few months of stability testing and we might have a viable seed stock for distribution." "Daddy," Evanice interrupted, "pasta stars finally secured. What's agriculture? Growing food, sweet pea." Evanice swiveled her entire body to face Ostina, her expression one of newfound awe. "You grow food. Can you grow candy?" "Evanice, candy doesn't," Gerald began. "Some of it does, actually," Ostina said, her smile widening. "On Valoria, we have a creeping vine called Sweet Tangle. It produces clusters of berries that, When ripe, taste like, well, the closest human equivalent would be caramel. But with more vitamins. Evanice's mouth fell open. Her eyes became twin galaxies of wonder. Caramel. That grows. On vines. Technically. I want to go to Valoria. Right. Now. Gerald laughed. A real, unguarded, warm sound that seemed to vibrate through the table. Ostina felt it resonate through her empathic senses, not as an intrusive noise, but as a pleasant, harmonic hum. She realized, with a start, that she had not picked up a single thread of discomfort from him. No hidden aversion, no subtle unease around her Valoran nature. Just a calm, steady, kind presence. It was liberating. "Can I ask you a question?" Evanice said, in the tone that parents universally recognize as the harbinger of either profound wisdom or profound embarrassment. Gerald winced preemptively. "Evanice, your ears are pointy," Evanice stated, leaning closer to Ostina. "Does that mean you can hear better than me?" Ostina touched the delicate point of one ear self-consciously, then relaxed. "A little better, yes. Especially higher-pitched sounds. Can you hear what Mr. Wobbles is thinking?" "I don't think anyone can hear what someone else is thinking, sweetheart," Gerald interjected gently. "Probably not," Ostina agreed. "But I could probably hear a mouse whisper from quite far away." "Probably," Evanice repeated, absorbing this with solemn satisfaction. Then she leaned in even closer, dropping her voice to a stage whisper that carried perfectly. "Don't tell Daddy, but I think you're really pretty. Like a princess. But green." The breath caught in Ostina's throat. Such a simple, artless statement. Such an impossibly generous gift. It felt like a bomb poured directly onto the raw wound Howard Beckwith had left. "Thank you, Evanice," she whispered, her voice thick again, but with a different emotion. "That might be the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me." Gerald cleared his throat softly. When Ostina looked at him, his expression was carefully composed, but there was a warmth in his brown eyes, a softness that hadn't been there before. "She's not wrong," he said quietly. "For the record." Before Ostina could formulate any kind of response, Evanice let out an enormous, jaw-cracking yawn that seemed to involve her entire small body. The excitement of the evening, the late hour, and the full stomach conspired against her. She slumped sideways, her head coming to rest against Ostina's arm, apparently deciding mid-collapse that this was a perfectly acceptable place to be. "That's the wall," Gerald said, his voice softening. "She's been running on Convergence excitement and sugar for about 2 hours past her bedtime." Ostina looked down at the small, blonde head nestled against her arm. At the little hand still loosely clutching Mr. Wobbles. At the absolute, unthinking trust implicit in the gesture. Human children were not usually so immediately comfortable with Valorans. They were keen observers, often picking up on their parents' subtle hesitations or unspoken reservations. But Evanice had bypassed all of that. She had seen a person in need and had acted, without a moment's doubt. "She's wonderful," Ostina whispered, meaning it more deeply than she could express. "She's everything," Gerald replied, his voice simple, factual, yet heavy with a world of meaning. He paused, his gaze on his sleeping daughter. "Since her mother died, she's been my whole world." The words settled between them, quiet and weighty. Ostina sensed the grief behind them through her empathy. Not a raw, screaming wound, but an old, deep ache that had been integrated into the very fabric of who he was. A loss carried every day, folded into the love for his child. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Gerald." He nodded, accepting the condolence without deflection or platitude. "Thank you. It was 2 years ago. A containment failure in a reactor test module on the outer ring." Hannah was a systems analyst. She was brilliant. He took a slow breath. Evanice was barely one. "She doesn't remember her." "Not really." "Does she ask about her?" "Sometimes. More around holidays, or when she sees other kids with their mothers." He watched the gentle rise and fall of Evanice's breath. "Lately, she's started asking for a new mom. Not a replacement. She's very clear on that point when she explains it to me. Just someone else. Someone to be there." He paused, the struggle plain on his face. "I don't know how to explain to a 3-year-old that it's not that simple. That you can't just find that at a station directory." Ostina said nothing. What could she say? That she understood loneliness. That she knew the hollow shape of a life missing its intended companion. It felt presumptuous to compare her string of failed dates to the magnitude of his loss. So she simply sat, allowing the silence to be a shared space, not an empty one. "I should get her to bed," Gerald said finally, stirring. He started to rise, then hesitated, looking at Ostina. This was really nice. Unexpected, but nice. "Thank you for indulging her." "Thank you," Ostina said, her voice earnest, "for sharing her with me." She meant it more than he could possibly know. Gerald carefully gathered Evanice into his arms. The little girl murmured, nuzzling into his shoulder but not waking. "Mr. Wobbles" dangled from her slack grip, his amber eyes dimmed to a standby glow. As Gerald turned to go, he paused again. "We're going to watch the moon alignment tomorrow from observation deck 7. It's smaller, less crowded than the main decks. The view is just as good." He shifted Evanice's weight. "If you're not busy, you'd be welcome to join us. No pressure. Just an offer." Ostina looked from his sincere face to the sleeping child in his arms. The cold dread of returning to her solitude clashed with a new, fragile hope. "I'd like that," she said. Ostina did not sleep well that night. She lay in her bunk, watching the navigation lights of passing maintenance drones streak like silent comets across her viewport, and replayed the evening in an endless loop. The sting of Howard's dismissal was still there, but it was muted, as if viewed from a great distance. Something had blunted its sharp edge. A small, warm hand in hers, a child's voice calling her pretty, a man's quiet offer of a handkerchief and a view of the moons. She arrived at observation deck 7 the next evening to find Gerald already there, setting up a portable heating coil beside a curved bench. Evanice spotted her first. "You came," she shouted, her voice echoing in the small, dome-shaped chamber. She came running, her boots making soft thump-thump sounds on the deck plating. Mr. Wobbles clutched to her chest. Daddy said you might not, but I knew you would. Because we're friends now, are we? Ostina asked, kneeling to her level. We've known each other a whole day, Evanice said, as if this were an eternity. That's lots of time. She grabbed Ostina's hand with her free one. Come see. The moons are lining up. They settled on the bench. Gerald had brought thick, insulated blankets. Evanice immediately orchestrated the seating, insisting Ostina sit on one side, Gerald on the other, with herself planted firmly between them, a human bookmark. Ostina found herself with a cup of warm, spiced cider in her hands and a small, solid body pressed companionably against her side. Outside the great transparent alloy viewport, Moria hung in majestic silence, its bands of ochre, copper, and gold slowly churning. One by one, with impossible, stately grace, its 7 moons were drifting into a perfect, linear alignment, a cosmic necklace being strung across the face of the giant. My mommy used to say the moons were dancing, Evanice said quietly, her earlier exuberance softened by the awe of the spectacle. Dancing really, really slow so we could watch. Ostina looked over Evanice's head at Gerald. His jaw was tight, but his eyes were soft, fixed on his daughter. That's a lovely way to think of it, Ostina said. She was good at that. Gerald's voice was a little rough. At making things lovely, even things that weren't. They lapsed into a comfortable silence, broken only by Evanice's occasional whispered commentary to Mr. Wobbles. As the 5th moon slid into place, Ostina felt the small weight against her side grow heavier. Evanice's breathing deepened, slowed. By the time the 6th moon joined the chain, she was asleep, her head having slid gently into Ostina's lap. Mr. Wobbles still held fast against her heart. She doesn't do this with everyone, Gerald said softly, his voice barely above a whisper in the quiet deck. Fall asleep on them. I mean, she's usually a bit wary of new people. Takes her a while to warm up. Children often react well to Valorans, Ostina said, her hand hovering uncertainly before gently resting on Evanice's back. We're told we project a sense of calm. Without trying to. Is that what you're doing? Gerald asked, turning to look at her. The light of the aligned moons painted his features in silver and ethereal gold. Projecting calm. Ostina considered the question with total honesty. No, she said after a moment. I actually feel calm. Which is unusual for me. Gerald held her gaze for a long moment, then looked back out at the celestial alignment. Can I ask, what happened last night? At the restaurant, before we crashed into your evening. So she told him. Not the whole, pathetic history. Not the 17 variations on rejection. Not the familial pressure from light years away. Not the creeping, private fear that she was fundamentally unlovable by anyone not of her own world. But she told him about the blind date, about Howard's arrival and his swift, brutal assessment. The particular sting of being found wanting not for who she was, but for what she was. Gerald listened without interruption, his profile outlined by starlight. When she finished, he was quiet for so long she wondered if she had said too much. "He was an idiot," Gerald said finally, his voice firm but not angry. "He's entitled to his preferences," Ostina said, the automatic, diplomatic response. "Sure, people are allowed to know what they want." But he handled it like a coward and a snob. And more than that, he missed out. Gerald turned to face her fully. He missed out on the chance to know someone worth knowing. The words were simple. The conviction behind them was a solid, warm thing in the cool air of the observation deck. Ostina felt her throat tighten again. "You don't know that I'm worth knowing," she protested softly. "We just met." Evanice knew within 30 seconds. Gerald countered, a small smile touching his lips. "I trust her judgment more than my own these days. Besides, anyone who can make her laugh while she's in full rescue the sad person mode is worth knowing. She's usually too focused on the mission to remember to laugh." "She's remarkable." "She is," Gerald agreed, his eyes drifting back to his sleeping daughter. "She's also exhausting, stubborn, and currently convinced that Mr. Wobbles needs to petition for his own private quarters. But yes, remarkable." He took a slow, deep breath. "She asked me this morning if you could be her new mom." Ostina's heart performed a complicated, stumbling rhythm in her chest. What? I tried to explain that it doesn't work like that. That people don't just become family overnight. That these things, they take time, and choice, and a lot of work." He rubbed the back of his neck, that familiar, endearing gesture. "But she's 3. Nuance isn't her strong suit yet." He met Ostina's stunned gaze. "I'm not telling you this to pressure you. God, no, I just thought you should know. She's already decided you belong with us. And Evanice, she doesn't change her mind easily." Ostina looked down at the sleeping child in her lap. At the small, perfect hand that had, in sleep, found its way to clutch a fold of her emerald dress. She thought of her empty quarters, her distant family, her quiet, careful, lonely life built on protocols and botanical data. "I don't know how to be a mother," she whispered, the admission terrifying and necessary. "I've never even considered it." "Neither did I," Gerald said, his voice gentle as the starlight. "Before she was born. You just figure it out as you go. One day at a time. One decision, one small crisis, one tiny triumph at a time." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. "If you wanted to, if any part of you wanted to, see where this goes. We'd like that." Ostina looked out at the viewport. The 7th and final moon was gliding into position, completing the perfect, breathtaking arc. Across Harmony Ring, she knew, thousands of people were cheering, toasting, embracing. Here, in this small, quiet deck, something infinitely smaller in scale but immeasurably profound in meaning was occurring. The cold fear of rejection was still there. The fear of not being enough, of being too alien, of failing. But it was met now, head on, by a new sensation, the warm, terrifying, glorious pull of possibility. "I'd like to see where this goes," she said, her voice clear in the stillness. "If you'll have me." Gerald's smile then was not the careful, guarded expression from the bistro. It was a full, bright, transforming thing that lit up his whole face, reaching his warm brown eyes and making him look years younger. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated relief and joy. "I'd like that, too, Ostina." From Ostina's lap, a sleepy, muffled voice declared, "Yay." The weeks that followed wove themselves into a rhythm Ostina had never dared imagine. Mornings began not in her sterile quarters, but in the warm, slightly cluttered living space of the Kale family unit, helping a very opinionated 3-year-old get ready for the station's early learning center. There was a specific way Evanice liked her pigtails, symmetrical, with the elastic bands placed exactly 3 centimeters from the base of each tail. Ostina, with her scientist's precision, mastered it by the 4th day. By the 6th, Evanice had declared her better at hair stuff than Daddy, a verdict Gerald accepted with a theatrical show of wounded pride that sent Evanice into fits of giggles. Evenings became shared meals, sometimes simple reconstituted meals in Gerald's quarters, sometimes a return to the Copper Nebula, where the staff began to greet them by name. Evanice always insisted on sitting between them, but also demanded that Ostina and Gerald hold hands across the table so everyone knows we're a family. It was a decree they obeyed, their fingers linking over the bread basket, a simple connection that felt anything but simple. Ostina learned the routines of this small, wonderful life. She learned which 2 songs Evanice needed to hear before bed, never 3. She learned that Mr. Wobbles required his own lullaby, a synthesized tune that Gerald had programmed which played from a tiny speaker in his chest. She learned which vegetables would be eaten if hidden in sauce, peas, carrots, and which would be detected and rejected with the unerring radar of a toddler regardless of culinary camouflage, anything leafy and green. She learned which nightmare Evanice had most often, a dark, silent room, and what comfort she needed afterward, a hug, a sip of water, and for Mr. Wobbles to tell a story via his pre-recorded adventure logs. And she learned Gerald, too, though more slowly. He was a man who had built careful walls after Hannah's death, not to keep the world out forever, but to ensure that anyone who entered his and his daughter's life was willing to stay, to weather the storms. Ostina respected those walls. She didn't try to scale them or batter them down. She simply waited beside them, patient and present, until he felt safe enough to open the gate himself. One evening, while Evanice was deeply engaged in constructing a wobbling tower of magnetic blocks with Mr. Wobbles offering enthusiastic, if unhelpful, balanced suggestions, Gerald told her about Hannah. She was a systems analyst, brilliant with code, could make a diagnostic AI sing show tunes if she wanted to. Terrible at cooking, she once set fire to synthesized eggs. Don't ask me how. I still don't understand the physics. He was smiling, a soft, sad, beautiful smile, his eyes distant with memory. She wanted 3 kids, a whole noisy, chaotic household. She had names picked out and everything. What were they? Ostina asked softly. Rosemary for a girl, Oliver for a boy. She said they sounded like characters from a good, old Earth book. He paused, the weight of the next words visible in the slump of his shoulders. She was pregnant when she died. 8 weeks. We hadn't told anyone yet. Ostina didn't offer empty words. She simply reached across the space between them and took his hand. He held on tightly, his grip speaking of a grief that was old but never gone, merely woven into the tapestry of who he had become. I thought I'd never want this again, he confessed, his voice a low rumble. Being this close to someone. Letting someone in. The risk of that kind of loss, it seemed insane. He looked at her then, and she felt the full weight of his attention, his choice. Then a 3-year-old with catastrophic impulse control dragged a crying alien woman to our table, and everything changed. In my defense, Ostina said, her own eyes glistening, I was not crying. I was leaking. He laughed, that warm, unguarded sound she had come to treasure, and pulled her into the circle of his arm. Not everyone on Harmony Ring was pleased. Dr. Emmeline Crow, the station's chief medical officer and Hannah Cale's closest friend, invited Ostina for tea 3 months into this new, unfolding reality. It was ostensibly a social call, but the assessment in the older woman's sharp blue eyes was unmistakable. Gerald and I were close before, Emmeline said, stirring her tea with precise, clinical motions. After Hannah died, I helped. Changed Evanice's diapers when he couldn't get out of bed. Made sure they both kept eating. She set the spoon down with a quiet click. He's told me how much you've helped. He's grateful. I'm not looking for gratitude, Ostina replied, meeting her gaze steadily. I'm looking to understand your intentions, Emmeline said bluntly. Evanice has already lost one mother. Her heart is resilient, but it's not invincible. If you are going to be a part of her life, you need to be certain you will stay. She cannot survive another abandonment. I have no intention of leaving. Intentions and outcomes are not the same thing, Emmeline countered. You are Valoran. Your people have bonding registries, communal obligations, family structures that don't always accommodate human entanglements. What happens when your homeworld summons you back? When your familial duties call? Ostina felt her spine straighten. I have already informed my family that I will not be participating in the bonding registry. My obligations to my birth community do not supersede my right to choose my own path, my own family. They will accept that, or they will not. But my decision is made. Emmeline studied her for a long, silent moment. Then, unexpectedly, the stern lines of her face softened into a genuine smile. Good, she said, the word carrying a weight of approval. I had to be sure. She reached across the table and briefly covered Ostina's hand with her own. Hannah would have liked you. You have the same quiet stubbornness she did. Is that a compliment in this family? Always, Emmeline said, her eyes glinting. The real, unspoken test came 6 months later, at the station's annual Coalition Unity Gala. A formal affair in the grand atrium, where dignitaries from a dozen species mingled under floating chandeliers of sculpted light. Gerald wore a dark suit that made him look distinguished and vaguely imprisoned. Ostina wore formal Valoran attire, layers of gossamer thin, sea-green fabric that moved like water, her hair braided with silver threads in the intricate pattern of her family line. Evanice wore a sparkly purple dress she had chosen herself, with Mr. Wobbles sporting a meticulously tied matching bow tie. They arrived as a family. They were announced as a family. And as they stepped into the glittering atrium, Ostina felt it. The pause, the turn of heads, the whispers that brushed against her empathic senses like static. Surprise, curiosity, and from some quarters, a cold, unmistakable disapproval. "They're looking at us," Evanice observed, not quietly. "Yes, sweetheart," Gerald said, his hand firm on her shoulder. "Some people haven't seen a family quite like ours before." "That's silly," Evanice declared. "We're a good family. The best," Gerald agreed. They navigated perhaps 20 minutes of polite small talk before a woman approached. She was tall, elegant, dressed in iridescent silk that cost more than Ostina's monthly stipend. Her smile was a perfect, polished curve that didn't touch her eyes. "Gerald, darling, it's been an age." She leaned in to kiss his cheek, her gaze sliding over Ostina as if she were a piece of furniture. "I heard you'd found someone new." "I didn't realize." Her eyes finally flicked to Ostina, a swift, dismissive inventory. "How new?" "Celeste." Gerald's voice was polite, but a chill had entered it. "This is Ostina Aivdo, my partner." "Ostina." "Celeste Pemberton. She worked with Hannah." "I did more than work with her," Celeste said, the emphasis heavy. "We were friends. Hannah and I talked about everything. She had very specific ideas about the family she wanted to build. Someone who would understand Evanice's heritage. Someone who could connect with human culture, human traditions." Her thin smile was a blade. "No offense intended, of course. But you must understand how unusual this arrangement appears. There are cultural gaps that simply can't be bridged." Ostina felt Gerald tense beside her, a coil of protective anger. She placed a gentle hand on his arm before he could speak. "Mrs. Pemberton," Ostina said, her voice calm, clear, and carrying. "I appreciate your concern for Evanice's welfare. Truly. It speaks well of your friendship with her mother." She paused, allowing her words to settle. "But I wonder if you might consider something. Evanice chose me, not because I am Valoran or human, but because she saw someone who was sad, and her first instinct was to help. That is the culture Hannah raised her in. A culture of kindness, of inclusion, of reaching out to strangers in need." Ostina allowed a small, genuine smile to touch her lips. "I don't think Hannah would find that unusual at all. I think she would be proud." Celeste's mouth opened, then closed. Before she could muster a retort, a small figure tugged insistently on her expensive silk skirt. "'Scuse me." Evanice stared up at her, small fists on her hips. "Mr. Wobbles tucked under one arm." Are you being mean to my mommy? The word, mommy, dropped into the conversational silence like a crystal bell. It vibrated through Ostina, a shock of pure, undiluted joy that left her breathless. Evanice had never called her that before. Not once in 6 months. Evanice, Gerald began, gently. If you're being mean to my mommy, Evanice continued, her voice rising with 3-year-old indignation, that's not nice. Mommy Ostina is the best. She does my hair, and reads me stories, and makes daddy smile again. You should be grateful, not mean. Celeste looked down at the fierce, small person confronting her, then up at Ostina, whose luminous tears were now streaming freely, happily, down her cheeks. They caught the light of the chandeliers, glowing with a soft, green-gold radiance. I see, Celeste managed. Well, I suppose I should circulate. She beat a retreat that was the very definition of a strategic withdrawal. Gerald knelt beside his daughter. Evie. That was very brave, and a little bit rude. She was rude first. 2 wrongs don't make a right. But 3 lefts do, Evanice said triumphantly. That's what you always say. Gerald laughed, the sound rich and free in the grand atrium. That, my love, is a navigation joke. Not a moral principle. Mr. Wobbles thinks it applies. Ostina knelt too, gathering Evanice into her arms, burying her face in the child's sweet-smelling hair. You called me mommy, she whispered, the words muffled. Evanice pulled back, looking at her as if she were stating the most obvious fact in the universe. You are my mommy. You have been for ages. I was just waiting for the right time to say it out loud. She reached up a small hand and wiped gently at Ostina's glowing tears. You're leaking again. Happy leaks, Ostina choked out, laughing and crying at once. These are happy leaks. Happy leaks are good. Mr. Wobbles approves. They left the gala early. The artificial night cycle had settled over Harmony Ring, the corridor lights dimmed to a soft, nocturnal blue. Evanice, declaring her legs too sleepy to work, rode on Gerald's shoulders. Mr. Wobbles clutched to her chest like a metallic talisman. I'm sorry about Celeste, Gerald said as they walked through the quiet rings. Don't be, Ostina said, her hand finding his. Evanice handled her with more grace and diplomacy than most ambassadors. She learned from the best. He stopped walking then, in a wide, curved corridor with a breathtaking viewport. Moria hung in the darkness, its 7 moons now scattered again across the velvet black, their perfect alignment a memory. He shifted so Evanice could slide down into his arms. She was nearly asleep, her head lolling on his shoulder. Ostina, he said, his voice suddenly serious, quiet. I know we've been taking things slow. Building this, step by step. Making sure it was right for Evie, for all of us. He took a deep breath, his warm brown eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her heart stutter. But I need you to know something. You are not temporary to us. You are not a phase, or an experiment, or a placeholder until something easier comes along. You are our family, my family, and I want, He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. I want to make that official. If you will have us. Gerald. I'm not proposing marriage. Not yet. Maybe that comes later. Maybe it doesn't. Humans get so caught up in ceremonies that don't always mean what we want them to mean. He shifted Evanice's weight, his gaze never leaving Ostina's face. I am asking you to stay. Forever. To let us be your home, the way you've become ours. To be Evanice's mother, in every way that matters. To be my partner. To build a life with us, here, among the stars. Ostina thought of the cold evening 6 months ago. The empty chair, the flickering candle, the certain, crushing knowledge that love in all its forms had passed her by. She thought of a small, warm hand reaching for hers in the darkness. A child's voice, cutting through despair with the simplest, most profound of questions, do you need a hug? She thought of pigtails and pasta stars, of lullabies for robots, of shared smiles over a sleeping child's head, of quiet evenings talking about reactors and rye, of a handkerchief offered without pity, of a man who saw her not as a Valoran, but as Ostina. The fear was still there, the old fear of not being enough, of failing. But it was dwarfed now, utterly, by the love that had grown in its place, a love as deep and steady as the station's artificial gravity, as bright and hopeful as the Convergence lights. Tears, luminous and joyous, spilled over once more. She didn't try to stop them. Yes, she said, her voice clear and sure in the quiet corridor. Yes to all of it. Yes to you. Yes to her. Yes to forever. From the crook of Gerald's arm, a sleepy, muffled voice inquired, did she say yes? She said yes, sweetheart. Good. Evanice yawned, a final, epic sigh of contentment. Tell her she has to do pancakes tomorrow. Daddy burns them. I do not burn them, Gerald protested, his own eyes suspiciously bright. You burned them last week. There was smoke. That was character. Artisanal char. It tasted like sadness. Ostina laughed, a full, rich, free sound that seemed to bounce off the stars in the viewport. She stepped forward, wrapping her arms around both of them. The man who had dared to open his guarded heart, the child who had chosen her without hesitation, the little robotic bear who was, apparently, an irrevocable part of the package. I'll make the pancakes, she promised, her voice thick with love. Every morning, for as long as you'll have me. Forever. Then, Evanice mumbled, already surrendering to sleep. Ostina's a forever mommy now. Me and Mr. Wobbles decided. Above them, through the curved transparistile, Moria turned in its eternal, silent vigil. Its 7 moons were scattered, each following its own path again, their perfect alignment a memory etched in light. But Ostina didn't need cosmic conjunctions anymore. She had found her alignment right here, in the steady rhythm of a small family's heartbeat. A family she hadn't known she was searching for, given to her not by fate or tradition, but by a moment of unthinking, childlike grace. And sometimes, she thought, as Gerald pressed a kiss to her temple and Evanice's small, sleeping hand found her cheek, that was how the best families were formed. Not through blood or careful planning, but through a stranger's tear, a child's offer of bread and company, and the boundless courage to say yes.